The first thing Jenna Cross felt was heat, blistering, unnatural, wrong. The air stank of ionized metal and scorched plastic. Alarms screamed in the distance, distant enough to feel unreal. She blinked, coughing, her hands instinctively reaching for her trauma kit. But it wasn't there. She wasn't in the field hospital anymore. The memory came rushing back like a tide. A refugee camp on the edge of Sudan's quarantine zone. Children with radiation burns. A sudden flash, a pulse that tore through the sky like it had been split open. Then nothing. And now this. She was lying on a cold, metallic floor under a canopy of alien lights, each glowing with a color her brain couldn't quite name. Above her, strange silhouettes moved, too many limbs, translucent skin, curved tools that looked like they belonged in both a surgery suite and a torture chamber. When she tried to sit up, a web of restraint bands kept her still. Panic flared. She twisted, resisted. A mechanical hiss answered her, and something sharp stabbed into her neck. Then black. The second awakening was worse. This time, she was upright, shackled in a standing position within a transparent containment tube. Outside, the aliens studied her like a specimen. They were insected, their armored bodies shimmering with bioluminescent patterns. Voices clicked and buzzed in an unintelligible language, but one phrase, repeated often, stood out: Metastrix variant. A designation. A label. She was being categorized. Hours, or days, blurred as they ran tests. Blood samples. Bone scans. Simulated injuries inflicted and healed. They'd discovered her training, and more disturbingly, they'd started mimicking her techniques. Her medical knowledge was being weaponized, translated into battle algorithms and regeneration protocols for their own soldiers. And she couldn't stop them. Her cells shifted locations frequently, each more alien and claustrophobic than the last. But wherever she woke, she was never alone. Soldiers, wounded, dying, mutilated, were brought to her. They dropped them at her feet with a hissed command and weapons drawn. Refusal wasn't an option. The first patient was barely alive. It had 3 chests, 2 of which were crushed. Jenna hesitated, but her hands moved. Adrenaline overrode terror. She worked quickly, tracheal tubing improvised from alien syringes, tissue resealing with plasma welders she barely understood. She saved it. Then another. Then another. Word spread. Soon she wasn't confined to a cage. She was mobile, always escorted, always watched, but moving from battlefield to battlefield aboard dropships that stank of death and ozone. She saw horrors stitched into the fabric of war, entire trenches filled with dying creatures whose organs screamed for help in ways no human anatomy class could prepare her for. But Jenna adapted. She learned. The Velther Dominion, as they called themselves, didn't just fight wars. They consumed them. They had no medics of their own. Too inefficient. Better to enslave one exceptional healer than train legions. Jenna became a critical asset. But her compliance was an illusion. Behind every field dressing, she memorized anatomy. Each surgery was also a reconnaissance mission. In her stolen moments, she mapped nervous systems, noted energy weaknesses, recorded vulnerabilities. And when they weren't looking, she treated prisoners, silent exchanges of aid and glances heavy with hope. One night, in a mobile triage dome orbiting the moon of Vaskar, Jenna met her first rebel. He was humanoid, barely older than a teenager, with skin like hammered copper and a guttural voice that trembled with pain. A Velther commander wanted him stabilized for interrogation. Jenna agreed, but as she worked, she slipped a coated vial into his bloodstream, a sedative and a neurocloaker. Enough to help him escape if he got the chance. He whispered something before they took him away. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone: gratitude. Reverence. The next day, 2 more rebels were brought in. Then 5. Some came willingly, disguised. Others were thrown at her feet, bleeding and broken. She saved as many as she could without drawing suspicion. Word was spreading beyond the Dominion. A human medic with impossible skills. A woman whose touch could undo the damage of their war machines. A healer who was not theirs. Her legend had begun. Still, Jenna was no closer to freedom. The Velther kept her close, but always under control. Each kindness she offered was shadowed by the knowledge that one mistake, one wrong cut, could lead to her execution. Yet even within the razor-thin line she walked, she found moments of rebellion. Subtle, surgical defiance. And then, the unexpected. A new escort replaced her usual handlers. This one wasn't Velther. He was tall, humanoid, and encased in gleaming armor laced with pulsing blue circuits. His eyes glowed faintly beneath a crystalline helm. He didn't speak, but Jenna could feel something different: restraint, curiosity, perhaps even respect. When she asked his name, he didn't answer. But he watched everything she did with unnerving precision. They brought in a dying Velther elite, half his thorax blown open by rebel tech. Jenna hesitated longer this time. The man had killed hundreds. She'd seen his handiwork. Her fingers trembled. The armored figure tilted his head slightly. Jenna wasn't sure if it was a threat or a gesture of encouragement. She worked anyway. She saved him. When the procedure was over, the figure approached and, without a word, handed her a new tool, sleek, refined, designed to fit a human hand. Surgical. Purposeful. She accepted it. And in that moment, something shifted. The war was far from over. She was still a captive, still a tool. But now, she had leverage. She had reach. She had a whispering network of patients and witnesses who knew the truth. The human wasn't just a prisoner. She was becoming a force. An anomaly they couldn't control. As the transport lifted off from the battlefield, Jenna looked out across the stars, her reflection staring back in the glass, blood-stained gloves, a face worn by exhaustion, and eyes that no longer belonged to the woman who once volunteered in relief tents. She was something else now. And the galaxy was beginning to take notice. They started calling her the Scalpel of Shadows after the siege of Darwin IV. Jenna Cross didn't choose the name, she didn't need to. The name chose her, spreading across war-torn systems in low whispers and encrypted transmissions, spoken with awe, fear, and in some corners, desperate reverence. The title followed her like a ghost, a reminder that she had become something more than a medic. She had become a myth. After months of captivity, Jenna no longer flinched at the sight of alien wounds. Her fingers moved with confidence, almost instinct, across exoskeletal fractures and pulsating neural ridges. She had developed her own methods, blending human precision with Velther technology, creating a hybrid medical technique no one else could replicate. The Dominion began deploying her not just to stabilize, but to save what should have died. And with every life preserved, their war dragged on longer. That was her curse. Every patient she healed prolonged the conflict she despised. Every field hospital she touched became an engine for continued conquest. But what the Velther didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly see beneath her calm obedience, was that Jenna wasn't working for them. She was turning their soldiers into her message bearers. Each healed warrior returned with more than a scar. Embedded in their bloodstream were dormant inhibitors, enzymatic tracers that could shut down nervous systems if activated. They never suspected the medic. Who would question a stitch, a salve, a breath of life given back? Jenna's war was quieter than theirs. It didn't roar with plasma fire or shake planets with orbital bombardments. It whispered in bloodstreams and crept through veins. And it was working. Her network grew. Rebels began infiltrating her camps, posing as wounded civilians, scavengers, or even captured Velther deserters. She treated them without hesitation, marking each one with a coded pulse signature. Her allies knew who had passed through her hands. And more importantly, they knew who she touched that could be turned. One night, deep within the medical vaults of Arcos Station, Jenna found herself face to face with a decision she hadn't prepared for. A high-value prisoner had been mortally wounded, a former rebel commander turned traitor. The Velther wanted him revived, interrogated, dissected for secrets. His chest was caved in, multiple organs ruptured. She could save him. She had the tools, the knowledge. But she didn't move. Then came the voice. "You hesitate," the armored figure said. He had no name still, no rank that Jenna could verify, but his presence followed her everywhere now. He watched more than the others. And unlike the Velther, he understood silence. This one deserves pain. Jenna looked up. You understand justice, then? I understand balance. She turned back to the dying man. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately. She stabilized him, barely. Enough to breathe, not enough to speak. He would linger. Suffer. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. Let his failure rot inside him like a lesson. Even healers could make surgical choices. The armored guardian said nothing, but when she stood, he nodded once. Just once. Jenna realized then that he wasn't Velther. Not truly. He was something else, bound to them by contract or necessity, not loyalty. He was watching her not just for control, but out of interest. And maybe, she thought, he was learning from her too. The rebellion began to shift. Whispers from the outer moons spoke of insurgent medics using human techniques, cloning her protocols, reverse engineering her surgical instruments. Jenna's reach extended beyond her hands. She was teaching a galaxy to heal in the language of resistance. But notoriety had its cost. The Velther began to suspect something. Not proof, just an unease, a pattern of recoveries that led to betrayals. They tried to isolate her, moving her deeper into military facilities, away from front lines. They reassigned her guards, replaced her staff. Still, the miracles continued. Then came the test. They brought her a child. Alien, young, but unmistakably injured from one of her own coded counteragents. A trap. A fake. Jenna saw it immediately. The inflammation was staged, the reactions too synchronized. The child's eyes cold, watching. Waiting. She treated him anyway. Perfectly. Coldly. But that night she hacked into the child's bioband and flooded the Velther servers with false telemetry, recordings of rebel transmissions, laced with misinformation. She gave them what they wanted, proof that confirmed all the wrong things. They backed off. In private she wept. Not for the deception. For the line she was forced to walk. The longer she lived in their system, the more she lost herself to it. And yet she pressed on. The war was not yet ready to end. Everything changed with Kale Varen. He wasn't supposed to live. A hybrid commander from a liberated world, Kale had been gutted during a failed assassination attempt. The Velther dumped him in her care as a test. He wasn't worth saving, but they wanted to see if she would try. She did more than try. She rebuilt him. Bone by bone, nerve by nerve, she brought him back. Not as a servant. As a message. Kale became her proof that no one was beyond salvation. When he rose again, part machine, part man, and entirely free, he pledged himself to her cause, not in worship, but in partnership. Together, they orchestrated the largest patient escape in the history of the war. Jenna created a biological anomaly within the Velther's regeneration tanks, a harmless contagion that triggered a false biohazard lockdown. During the chaos, over 200 prisoners vanished, smuggled out through emergency waste shafts laced with her markers. The Velther never suspected her. But Kale knew the cost. You're becoming something they fear more than death, he told her as they stood over the now abandoned medical bay. You don't kill. You undo. Jenna didn't reply. Her hands were already covered in someone else's blood, reaching for the next patient. She was no longer just a medic. She was a weapon. And they were too late to stop her. The rebellion's turning point didn't come with an explosion, a battle, or a broadcast. It came with a heartbeat, measured, steady, undeniable. Jenna Cross stood over a Velther Prime commander, his chest cavity open, his neural cluster exposed. Around her, monitors blinked warnings in 5 languages. A dozen Dominion officers watched from behind reinforced glass. None could enter. None dared breathe. She was doing what they could not. The Prime was dying from a synthetic toxin that had been designed to be uncurable, a final fail-safe injected by the Dominion to prevent his capture. But Jenna had found a way. She'd learned their biology too well. She understood how the cells bent and broke under pressure. She knew which enzyme pathways collapsed last. She wasn't healing him. She was controlling him. With each careful incision and counteragent, she rewrote his end, making him live, not as a hero, but as a liability. When he awoke, bound to a data nexus to keep his organs alive, his first sight was her eyes. Calm. Cold. Human. I gave you back your life, Jenna said, her voice level. So you can watch everything you built come apart. The Dominion faltered after that. Not because they lost faith in their technology, but because they lost control of their myth. Jenna was no longer a tool. She had become a reckoning. A ghost in their systems. Rumors swirled. She had infiltrated their command implants, sabotaged gene tanks, even taught death itself to wait on her terms. The name, Scalpel of Shadows, no longer inspired awe among the Velther. It instilled dread. But she hadn't done it alone. Cale Varen remained her shield. Where she operated in sterility and silence, he carved a path through chaos. They didn't always agree. He wanted to strike faster, harder. Jenna understood patience. Not every enemy needed a battlefield. Some needed a diagnosis. A long, slow infection of doubt, of betrayal, of the knowledge that their own systems no longer belonged to them. Jenna's methods were precise. Her targets deliberate. She healed a Velther general, only to infect him with a time-released hallucination protocol that turned command briefings into nightmares. She saved an alien diplomat's child from organ collapse, then encoded a visual-only plea for rebellion into the girl's retinas. Every blink a transmission. Every breath a whisper of resistance. Still, the Dominion pushed back. They deployed countermedics. Artificial intelligences designed to predict and block her strategies. They tried to recreate her techniques using cloned data. But they missed the one element that couldn't be synthesized: her will. Jenna wasn't just reacting to war. She was rewriting it, one wound at a time. The final push came when the Velther initiated the Virex protocol, a mass sterilization virus aimed at the outer colonies that supported the rebellion. It was cruel, indiscriminate, and horrifyingly effective. By the time Jenna intercepted the data, entire populations were already exhibiting symptoms. But she was no longer alone in the dark. She activated every marker, every dormant signature she had ever embedded. Across the galaxy, patients who had passed through her hands lit up like constellations on hidden scanners. Rebel medics followed the signals. Supplies were airlifted. Protocols deployed. A vaccine synthesized from Cale's altered blood arrived in time to stop the second wave. The Virex virus didn't spread. Hope did. The rebellion no longer just fought the Dominion, they outmaneuvered them, with the guidance of a healer who understood their weaknesses better than they did. Jenna never appeared in broadcasts. Never held a weapon. But when rebel fleets gathered, her emblem, a red cross over a black scalpel, was painted on every hull. Then, the Velther did what they believed unthinkable. They offered her a deal. Amnesty. Freedom. Earth. All of it restored, if she would surrender her research and cease her interference. They delivered the offer through her armored escort, the silent figure who had watched her for so long. He spoke the words himself, carefully, as though he didn't believe them. "You'd be safe," he said. "No more war. No more blood." She studied him, this warden-turned witness. "You think I want safety?" He hesitated. "I think you've earned it." Jenna placed her tools down slowly. Her gloves were stained from the day's work. Behind her, Cale adjusted a rebel's breathing rig. Outside, engines ready for another raid. She was tired. Her bones ached in ways that no healing could fix. But she wasn't done. "I've earned something," she said. "But not rest." The envoy lowered his gaze. "They'll send more after you. They always have." He didn't move. But in his silence she heard something different this time. Not threat. Not warning. Regret. Later that night, Cale approached her with a data crystal glowing faint blue. "Dominion fleet schematics," he said. "Courtesy of our silent friend." Jenna took it, her fingers brushing his. The next morning, the rebel fleets struck 3 Velther shipyards simultaneously. Jenna wasn't there. She was already moving to the next conflict zone, another outbreak, another chance to heal. She never stopped. Not because she couldn't, but because she knew, finally, what she had become. Not a medic. Not a soldier. Something in between. A scalpel. Cutting away the infection. 1 star at a time.